right, good evening, folks. Taylor Ellwood with Magical Experiments here, and we are going to be talking all about results and issues that people have around results. And this came about because in the Magical Experiments community, one of the questions I asked is what challenges are people having this week? And a lot of the challenges that I noticed were that people were having challenges around results. For example, I had one person who shared that, she doesn't get instant results like yesterday instead of tomorrow and being impatient around getting results. Um, I had another person share as an example that sometimes not getting what they want, and the frustrations around that. Um, Another person talked a bit about their limiting beliefs and how those limiting beliefs could get in the way. And another person talked about framing the results or framing the work. Now, not all of this is necessarily entirely around results. I mean, some of these things can be addressed in other ways, but I think it's worthwhile to look at it in the context of results. Now, in my process of magic approach to things, the way that I have people start out with their magical work is to actually define the results. And the reason why is because a well-defined result is indicative of what it is that you're actually trying to get, as opposed to a poorly defined result. And what I find in general is that when most people are, doing magical work, a lot of what they're doing is they're avoiding defining that result. And the reason why is because they make the mistake of assuming that if they define the result, they're lusting for the result. They fall for that old lust for a result trap where they're like, well, if I define it, then it must mean I'm lusting for it. Well, that's not the case at all. The fact of the matter is you cannot develop a magical working without developing a result in the first place. You have to know what you want. But if you're vague about what you want, it can be very hard for you to properly frame and focus that magical working. So when we talk about results and defining our results, we want to get specific. A good example that I use a fair amount, but it's just an easy and applicable one is, let's say you decide you're gonna do some job magic. You want to get a job. If you just say the desired result is I want a job, then guess what? Any job will do. That's all there is to it. You do magical working and you get a job at a fast food place, that may not be the job you wanted, but if all you did was specify I want a job, then you got exactly what you wanted. You got a job. It may not be a great job, but it's a job. If, on the other hand, you take the time to clearly define what it is you want in relationship to that job, that in and of itself helps to structure the magical working. So instead of saying just I want a job, how about taking the time to define what kind of job you want? What kind of work will you be doing? Who will you be working with? Will you be working directly with customers? Will you only be working with coworkers? What kind of interactions do you want to have with those people? What kind of relationship do you want to have with your manager? Oh, and here's an important thought. What kind of benefits and pay do you want? These are all important things to define, but a lot of times people won't drill down to that necessary level of detail when it comes to defining a result. And so, consequently, the results they get aren't necessarily as good as they want them to be. When you create that specific level of defined result, what ends up happening is that you create the necessary focus for your actual process, because you start looking at your process and you ask yourself, am I factoring in the level of detail that I've defined in my result in the actual process of magic? And if you are, it becomes much easier to get that result. And if you aren't, well, that'll show as well. One of the ways that I like to look at results as well is that a result is really just an indicator of where you are wanting to go. Now that seems a little odd. A lot of people will say, well, isn't the whole point of practicing magic that I'm supposed to get a result? Well, yes and no. Results-oriented magic certainly is focused around getting specific, measurable results. But here's the thing that I always like to say to people. When you're doing magical work, even when you don't think you're getting a result, you still are getting a result. Even if nothing occurs, you've still gotten a result. Now, what you might say is, why would that be an indicator? And here's the answer to that. The lack of a result is still an indicator that something isn't working in your magical process. If you had nothing occur, then that means something didn't work somewhere, and it's time to troubleshoot that magical working. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. Let's say you get a partial result. Let's say you get something of what you want, but it's not quite what you wanted. Well, that's still an opportunity for you to go back and look at what it is you're trying to specifically accomplish and where things maybe didn't go the way you want. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that you exactly got the result that you wanted. Well, that's still an opportunity to look at the process as well and figure out, well, what worked? The other thing to keep in mind is that when you get a result, there's always going to be ripples that come out of that result, i.e. consequences. There's no such thing as getting a result and living in a vacuum. Results have consequences. Now, they can be good consequences or bad consequences or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, a consequence is or a result is just part of your actual process. And this is why, in my approach to magic, I always stress that yes, the result's important, but it's not important in the way you think of it. It's not just about obtaining the result. It's about understanding the place of that result in your life. Now, one of the issues that one of the people mentioned was, that they wanted instant results, or that, they want it like now. And I get that, Here's the thing. I'm not going to tell you that it's not ever possible to get instant results, because I've had a few occasions where I've had instant results. It just takes a lot more effort. And here's why. When you're dealing with when you want something fast, right? You want it now. What you have to recognize is that you are going to be exerting a lot more effort, because what are you dealing with? You're dealing with conforming reality in alignment with your will in order to manifest something right now. But think about all the variables that are involved in that, depending on what it is. If you want something now and you need it to happen, you've got to line all your ducks up in a row in order to get that thing to happen like that. And you better be on top of everything if that's what you want to have happen. Most people aren't on top of everything like that. I prefer a different approach. I prefer an approach where I line everything up and I make it, and everything happens at exactly the right time so that the result occurs when I want it to occur. And so my approach to magic is very much along the lines of lining up the variables and setting everything up and setting it up so that the result manifests at the right time and place for me. And this is where we get into a bit of space-time magic. So we have a couple different approaches if we want to manifest a quote-unquote instant result in this kind of scenario. One thing that we can do is we can do what is called retroactive magic. With retroactive magic, what we're doing is we're basically doing magical work, but we're sending it to the past in order to line the situations up in the present or near future in order to manifest our desired result. Here's the key thing to remember. We're not physically changing the past, okay? So don't go down that rabbit hole of, ooh, retroactive magic, I'm going to physically change the past. That's not where we're going. What we're doing, though, is we are basically we're doing magic where we're basically saying, okay, 3 days ago, I needed things to happen this way, so I'm going to do a magical working as if those things did work out that way 3 days ago. And the reason I'm going to do it that way is so that it basically opens up the possibility for the desired result to manifest Because even though I didn't necessarily do what I wanted to do 3 days ago, I'm going to act as if, in fact, I did, and I'm going to do the magical work, and I'm going to actually send it back toward the past with the idea being that it's going to open up that possibility in the present. And now that might sound a little strange because you're going to say, well, Taylor, you just said you can't change the past physically. Yes, I did. As in I mean that you can't physically time travel into the past and say to yourself, hey, so and so, go and do this right here. What you can do, though, is you can send your magic toward the past and set up circumstances that rewrite the memory of the experiences and start to open up doors of possibility so that things start happening like that. And then, boom, there's your result. The way that I like to do this is that you can do it through a meditation technique where you're remembering the past and rewriting the past in a specific way. I like to work with the idea of a path working where I will actually visualize the potential past or the future and basically relive the events and work through them and set them up in such a way that it then moves that timeline into my present. All of these techniques are shared in my Spacetime Magic books. So, I mean, if you're interested in that, check those books out. But then we also have another approach, and this is the Space-Time sigil comic method that I have, where what I'll do is if I want seemingly instant results, I will create multiple sigils and bind them together. And when one sigil manifests, what ends up happening is the other sigils end up manifesting. And the reason why is because you're taking the combined metaphysical mass of those sigils and you're creating it so that when one manifests, it automatically pulls the others in because it's overcome the inertia that's against it. And so suddenly the momentum of the universe is on your side, pulling in those possibilities. I did this a number of years ago, back in my grad student days when I was a poor grad student and didn't have a car at the time and really needed it because I had just started writing my magic books and I wanted to hit the occult convention scene. Plus, I was tired of walking in the snow to get my groceries. When you're a 20-something guy and you're living on $1,000 a month while going to graduate school, it ain't exactly glorious living. So how was I going to afford a car? Well, what I did is I created a multiple sigil working, and I specified it for a few different things. It wasn't even all related to the car. One was for the car, one was for dealing with the troublesome coworker at the time, and one was for some other situation. I don't even remember what it was. The troublesome coworker situation got resolved almost immediately, and right after that, I got a call from my dad saying, "Hey, I just got this feeling that you need some help lately, and what do you need?" And I told him I needed a car, and he went ahead and gave me the money for it, and the rest was history. I was able to now travel to occult conventions, and more importantly, I was able to drive to the grocery store and back home again. Never underestimate the little comforts in life and what you'll do to get those. But that involved taking these multiple sigils and setting them up, and it seemed like an instant result. It was really the alignment of specific probabilities in order to achieve a measured outcome that produced a successful result. Now, there's some other interesting techniques that we can explore space-time wise, and I'm going to do a few more videos along this line in the near future because I think it'll be fun to explore this in some degree. But I want to get back to the topic at hand with results. One of the other people mentioned having a internal resistance toward results, and my recommendation around that is that if you have some type of internal resistance towards something, you need to do some internal work around that and examine why you feel the way you do. What's coming up? Do you have a moral or ethical block? Do you have a feeling of not feeling do you have a sense of not feeling worthy of something? Is it something else? Any of these things can play a role in why you're not getting what you want. In fact, I'll tell you that 9 times out of 10, The reason why you're not getting a result you want is you. It's because there's stuff going on within you. And when you recognize that and can take control of it, that's when you'll find that your magical work can dynamically shift in a way that allows you to start getting those results. It's kind of similar too to situations where you get a result for a little while, but then the result goes away. If you've ever had that situation happen, and I have, what happens is you get the result for a little while, and then something just and then it just goes away, and it's gone from your life. Well, why did you get the result in the first place? Well, you got it in the first place because you were able to muster up enough energy, what have you, to put everything together. But then some part of you sabotaged yourself, and that's why the result went away. Again, this may seem a little simplistic, but I'll tell you, if you apply a common sense approach to troubleshooting your magic, you will find out very quickly what is or isn't working. Now, if you want help with that, I have an excellent book called How to Troubleshoot Your Magic, which is a short book, but it's very concise and it'll walk you through it. And the other thing I recommend as well is a course in my Magical Experiments University, aptly called How to Troubleshoot Your Magic. Between the two of those things, that should help you figure out what's going on with your results and why you're not getting them. And of course, if you ever want to share in the group, in the Magical Experiments group, as anyone knows, I'm more than happy to comment on things, and I'll give you some suggestions and ideas to work on. The most important thing you can do for yourself, though, is recognize what I said at the very beginning, which is to recognize that the result is part of the process. It is not the end of the process. It is part of the process. When you shift your thinking around results in that way, it helps you start to look at them differently, because you start asking yourself, well, how does the result actually fit into the magic? I find that people tend to divorce, in a weird kind of way, they divorce the result from the magic. Like, they'll do magic to get a result, they'll get the result, and they'll be like, yes, the magic got the result. Okay, great. But they don't realize that the result is a natural part of the process of magic, of the result. So when you recognize that your result is actually an integral part of your process of magic, this is going to help you understand and apply those results in a way that's meaningful to you, because you'll start examining them and saying, well, where does this result really fit into what I'm doing? Why am I not getting what I want? Or why am I getting what I want? What's working? And it's equally important to identify what's working as it is to figure out what's not working. Too many magicians are not curious about how magic works. And as you know, that is a no-fly for me. You need to be curious about what you're doing and why. You need to understand what's going on and why your magic isn't getting you what you want if you're doing it. Don't fall into that foolish crowd of the just do it crowd, where people are like, oh, just do magic. Don't think about it. No, think about it. Figure it out. Figure out why you're not getting the result. Figure out what's working and what isn't working. If you want to become a better magician, you have to learn how to streamline your approach. You've got to be willing to take those things that you take for granted and consciously examine them. Go back to the basics if you need to, quite frankly, because that will actually teach you a lot more about magic than you might realize. I went back to the basics a few years ago. And the reason why I did it, I mean, I've been practicing magic for years and years, but I went back to the basics because I went through a period where the results weren't happening. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why isn't this working? So I went back to the basics, and I started figuring out what wasn't working with my process. And this is how I incidentally developed this system around troubleshooting your magic, because I really started to examine every single thing I did and didn't do. And of course, there's going to be variables that you can't account for. Like, you're going to do magical workings, and there's going to be variables that come up that you couldn't have anticipated at the time. It happens. When that occurs, figure out what the variable was. Ask yourself how you could anticipate it, and then go back and rework that magical working. Treat your magical workings like programs. You can always go back in and rewrite the code, redo the working. There's nothing stopping you from doing that other than yourself. Remember, at the end of the day, what makes an effective magician isn't the books that you read. It's not even the people you learn from like me. I mean, hey, I'm flattered if you learn something from me, but I'm just a guide. What makes you an effective magician is your willingness to take charge of your magical workings. It's your willingness to take a look at what you're doing and why. Anything else can help you, but no one else is the ultimate spiritual authority other than yourself. That includes me, that includes any other teacher, author, or anything else like that. You are the spiritual authority of your life. So take charge of your magic. Take charge of how you're approaching things. And if you need help, feel free to hit me up in the group. Check out my book on how to troubleshoot your magic, or the course on how to troubleshoot your magic in the Magical Experiments University. And otherwise, I will see you guys next week, and have a fabulous, awesome weekend. Take care and stay magical, folks.